without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guests. We're excited to have you here today, Dr. Herman. And yeah, I think I've been thinking since you agreed to become a special guest, I was thinking back when we got this project started and all the different folks involved and how Oakland Zoo reached out to us. It was really cool. You guys reached out and said, hey, we want to help with this local species, the California condor, and how can we help? And you guys came right to the table, and maybe that might be a good segue for you to jump in and tell the history of the project, because it's been really such a great contribution to the program.
Yeah, so we started seeing condors here and treating them in 2014, but it was definitely a couple years of work. Dr. Andrea Goodnight, who's now at Living Desert, really spearheaded the effort. But what we really wanted to do is just support survival of this magnificent bird. And we're a good location for the central flock. We're a zoo with capability of treating these animals. And a lot of support. We were able to build a special structure just for them. So when they're here, they're housed in a pretty quiet place. It's out behind our elephant barn, but we have 2 stalls for them. We have misters. We can feed them anonymously. It's a whole building specifically built for them. So we definitely had the resources for the physical plant and then also the staffing. This is one of our Oakland Zoo. That's my senior hospital keeper, Adam Zuby, holding a bird. So we have a big crew of good handlers. We have a whole condor team here at the zoo that have trained with a lot of people like Joe and Mike down in LA. And so we're 100% on board. These birds are really important to us too. And, we're just happy to be of service for sure.
Yeah, and now you even have condors on display at Oakland Zoo.
We do. Our California Trail, which is all dedicated to important California wildlife, past and present. So basically extinct in the state or not. We do have 2 condors there. And that's really nice because we have a lot of educational material for the public to see about the Condor Recovery Program and the effect of lead on the environment. Microtrash, we have a lot of talking points about that. And really can bring it to the public, which is great because I think they understand the little things that they do when they're out tootling around in Big Sur or pinnacles, but then also the deleterious effects of lead.
Yeah, and that is an amazing exhibit. I remember when they were in the construction phase and they were getting our input about pen design, and that I was looking at the other exhibits, the grizzly bear, and I mean, for folks that haven't been there, it's amazing. The whole it's called the California Trails, right? You take a tram up to it.
Yeah, it's, very naturalistic exhibits. I would say the big complaint from the guests is sometimes you can't see the animals. For example, our wolf exhibit is so massive that sometimes it's hard to see the wolves. But what it does mean is we get a lot of natural behavior. The animals are very healthy and it's, progress.
That was actually what I liked about it. So
yeah.
But kudos to you guys. And I think it's, I think maybe describe the actual facility, because I think it is very specialized what you guys built for this need to treat condors that come in, not only for lead poisoning, which is a majority, but we do bring in other birds that have had injuries. But maybe describe what that facility can do.
So really, there's a few parts to what we do. We have a full hospital. We treat the 850 campus residents at the Oakland Zoo, but we also do, condor work. We're the place where California Fish and Wildlife brings all the orphan mountain lions or teenage mountain lions that just go astray. We also do a lot of riparian brush rabbit work. So we do a lot of wildlife work at the Oakland Zoo in addition to taking care of the zoo residents. So we have a full zoo hospital. And so that's, surgery, treatment, oxygen cages. We have 3 full-time veterinarians. We have 4 full-time veterinary nurses. We have 2 hospital keepers dedicated to take care of the wildlife coming through. And then also the Oakland Zoo residents. The other thing that we do have is we do have a Condor recovery team made up of animal care folks as well. So there's 4 very dedicated high-level keepers from outside of the hospital in the zoo that are trained to work with us on the condors and help care for them. So we really have a big crew here that's pretty trained for the condors, and our hospital facility is quite large. You know, we can hospitalize a baby giraffe or a frog or a condor, but what we try to do with the condors is bring them in. We do our whole first day assessment, which I'm happy to describe in detail. And then once we start the chelation protocol, like this picture is in our hospital. This is a first day admit that I'm working on with Adam Zuby. And then we'll house them down in this quiet, isolated, specially designed, it truly was just built for Condors building, so that the rewilding and the toggle back and forth between captive treatment has less deleterious behavioral effects. Even how we catch them is really, really intentional based on the Mike Clark LA Zoo model. We try to have them accept the net. A positive thing is being netted and held for treatment, so that as they toggle back and forth from the wild through treatment for lead, you know, they're going to go back out there and often be re-exposed. There's a lot of lead still in the environment. That actual toggle between captive treatment and being a wild bird takes away as little of their wildness as possible. So that behavioral aspect is really important to us here, as well as treating them to get lead out.
Yeah, and God, I'm trying to think of how many condors have we treated at Oakland Zoo?
So since we started in 2014, we've treated 44 condors. Here's Monica, our head nurse, who's very dedicated to the condor program and has been.
She is.
So we've treated 44 condors, but it was interesting because we've had birds like 431, we've treated 4 times. So 44 different birds, but multiple treatments for many birds.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You said 431, that bird ended up dying from lead poisoning. So.
Yep, exactly. So, and came in a few years in a row. So, you know, like you guys were saying, the private lands where they're exposed to the lead, really focusing on the non-lead ammo outreach is a great place for everybody to support.
Yeah, and, you know, we keep talking about it, but everyone knows, you know, definitely people that tune in, and last month we focused on it, but, you know, the #1 threat is lead poisoning. And, you know, I think it's one thing to say how condors are lead poisoned, you know, from the physical standpoint of them foraging on an animal. And just like in this photo, they ingest a small bullet. This is a .22 caliber bullet that this bird ingested and ended up dying from. But I think what I've always, and this is your expertise, is really what happens to these birds, and even on the, you know, from low level to these really acute situations like this bird, and just that there's just all these complexities within there, and just, I mean, what it does to their systems, it just, from what we see, it just wreaks havoc on them on every level.
Yeah, it's multifactorial, and there's definitely chronic lead toxicity, acute lead toxicity, and then acute on chronic. So someone's cruising around with a low level chronic burden, and then they maybe ingest something like this and get a really acute slam. So there's no physiological need for lead. No body needs lead for anything. And I think that's something to remember. It really, you know, it affects calcium metabolism. And what it really affects clinically that we see as doctors is the guts, how the GI tract works, neurologic, stumbling birds, birds that can't fly, birds, honestly, with low level toxicity that are making a bunch of dumb decisions. That's so well documented in human beings who are exposed to lead paint and, you know, substandard housing. So the repercussions from the lead are so far reaching. The most research is in humans, but we know there's reproductive effects, there's impulse control effects, there's decision-making effects, there's neuromuscular effects, intestinal, gut, crop effects, and then also can cause kidney failure and liver failure. The first thing that we see in these guys when they're clinically ill from the lead, in my experience, and I think most people would agree, would be gut. Their gut just slowed down. They stop digesting their food, and, you know, we'll get a guy in that he just really has rotten garbage in his crop because he can't move his crop. And sometimes a crop that's distended for a long time and losing its mobility and its ability to move food, it can take a year to really regain mobility again. So the inability to eat, the inability to digest food, the inability to get the nutrition that they need, and also the inability, because once you get gut stasis, so the peristalsis stops, that lead isn't moving out of there either. You know, like this guy, the lead's probably in his ventriculus, and like he needs to cast, he needs to clear his crop. He needs to defecate and fly around and move and eat some more to get that out. So it's really a vicious circle, because then, you know, the lead slows it down, but then also because of the slowdown, they have a harder time getting the lead out. So
yeah,
and so that's the first thing that we see.
Yeah, we see different levels depending on when we get to a bird, but you know, the telltale is the crop stasis, which, you know, for a condor, digestion's everything. I mean, for any living animal really, but for condor in particular, you know, they're normally eating pretty rotten things that have high bacteria. And we suddenly see, it seems like when this lead just kind of opens up the gauntlet, like that stuff that they can normally fight off all of a sudden becomes their enemy. You know, these
very immune suppressed by the, so, and it's multifocal too. You know, you can have mild neurologic signs, so you land in a stupid way and hurt your foot. You can have poor digestion, so you just don't make good food choices and start to starve. You know, you can be walking around starving. And then of course the kidney and the liver failure, as those progress, they can't maintain hydration. Their guts, you know, with liver failure, one of the sequelae is the guts don't move. So it can be a real chicken and egg vicious cycle for them.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you've treated these birds. I think we get a lot of questions about that. Like when we bring in depending on the severity, you know, what are the different tools you guys have to save some of these birds?
So we're always in there treating the treatable. So first thing, you know, if it sounds good, I can just kind of roll you through. You guys drive up with the high lead sick bird, what we do. Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
So basically a bird arrives, pinnacles or big sir. So the whole central flock is who we serve. And so the bird arrives and we bring them into our proper hospital. And we do radiographs in something called an ABBA, which is a specially made cloth that we wrap around their body so that we can do x-rays without having to anesthetize them. And that really lets us know anything else going on. What do their lungs look like? How's their bony density? How do their guts look? But lets us know fragment, no fragment. If they do have a fragment, we have to have them pass those fragments. So we'll chelate and monitor fragments. And some fragments in the crop, we're going to encourage them to cast by feeding them a lot of cast material. So that would be, you know, rabbit fur, rat fur, that kind of thing, so that they can cast more often, so they can get it out of either their ventriculus or their crop. If it's in the small intestine, what we'll do is try to really, really hydrate them so they could just pass it, because things in the small intestine don't cast. It's more the upper intestinal tract. So we take blood work so that we can check their red and white blood cell count, see if there's any infection, any anemia. Lead toxicity can cause anemia, but shockingly in the condors, we don't see it a lot. We see it more in other species. And then we do serum biochemistries, and that tells us how are their kidneys working? How's their liver working? Where are all those values? So we can kind of say, this is a big, strong bird, but he's going into liver failure. We need to treat him with other medication than just chelator for the lead. And chelate is a Latin word for claw. So what calcium EDTA is a molecular claw that we inject in the bird, and it goes into their bloodstream and pulls the lead out so that they can pass it through their kidneys and get rid of the lead in their body. But if you think about it, if they have a fragment that's giving them the lead, we need to pass the fragments. So that's a mechanical problem, as well as the biochemical problem that we're addressing with calcium EDTA. Concurrently with all this, we always keep them super hydrated, supports the kidney, supports the liver, helps them pass the lead as it's chelated. The chelating agents can also be hard on their kidneys, so we're really mindful of that. Like, big problems need strong meds, and strong meds are more likely to have side effects. So we're always really sheltering their kidneys as they're going through this process.
Wow, I know it's just what you just described. I mean, the amount of effort right there, and just all the different nuances of I mean, this is just one case, and how you guys have to adapt to every case, just depending on what you're seeing, So I'm glad you articulated that so well, because I've always tried to describe that to people, the amount of effort that goes in just to save one given bird that's under one exposure, and just the complexities that go into that. I mean, it's amazing. So we do our end of it, of trying to keep up with them and find them before it's too late. But really, hats off to you guys when we bring you these birds and you put in these Herculean heroic efforts to save them. We can't help but appreciate that on every level, especially when we're seeing these birds, their lives being cut so short, and these repeated exposures. So that importance of the non-lead, and the whole message, and just getting, I think, more people, if the more people understand what these birds and how often they're suffering, I think that will make a lot of people switch over to using non-lead. And we've talked about it just separately, about that mission to get everyone to switch. And I think if folks realize how much not only condors, all the other wildlife that get impacted by lead are suffering, they would probably have a change of heart, I think. Because I've never seen an animal suffer like that. It's pretty brutal to watch, to witness. And I know for you guys, when we bring you these birds, we're asking for miracles,
And it's hard to know. We treated 431 4 times and she still died from lead, just because of repeated re-exposure in the environment. So, but when we leave the hospital with the birds, so we do all this in our hospital, and then this picture on the right actually is down in our Condor building. Then daily we'll catch them with this super cool netting protocol that we all really train hard to do. And we handle them, and we do injections of the calcium EDTA, injections of fluid, get them to cast if they need to get the lead fragments out. Follow blood work on them for lead levels and also health. Sometimes we'll have a guy walk in the door with a liver problem. We want him to walk out the door without that liver problem anymore. So we'll follow all of that. So the protocol is once a day for 5 days, and then they get to rest for 2 days. So their body can recover from the handling and also the medications.
Yeah, and this is the tougher question is, sometimes we bring birds in, they appear to be on their last leg, and maybe you can describe why some of these birds can't be saved. I mean, it's not something any of us want to accept, when we've committed our lives to helping these birds and getting them back out in the wild. But sometimes you see a bird that its odds aren't good.
Yeah, well, it's true with any disease. There's a level that the body can recover from and a level that the body can't. Sometimes with these guys with gut stasis like this, crop full of junk and intestines that don't have peristalsis. I know we had one guy recently, a couple of years ago, we treated him with severe crop stasis. His crop didn't work well again for a year. He was down in LA in rehab. So, it really can change the abilities of the organs to work on a cellular level. So I think a lot of these guys run around with some chronic lead. We have really great data from Santa Cruz about the bones harboring lead. So we could be, bringing lead levels down in the blood, but there might be a lead sink in their body that's repopulating their body with lead. So it's very complicated, the whole lead metabolism. And so I think we have birds that are mentally severely disabled, have lost all their muscle mass from not eating. They're in kidney failure. And just like we know for kidney failure in anybody, like you can have acute kidney failure you bounce back from. You can have chronic kidney failure that's managed for a long time. And you have acute on chronic, a debilitated animal gets another load of lead and they just can't bounce back from it like a younger, healthier, or unexposed animal would. So all different clinical scenarios present for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, yeah, all that background is great. And, it is kind of a sad topic, but it is kind of something we need to talk about. And I think for people to understand what's going on with these birds, to hear it from the clinical side is really, really awesome. Just from, even for me today, I've learned a lot. So thank you. And, I mean, maybe your final thoughts on, I know you're very, you have your thoughts on what people can do to help.
I think a lot of things, like I know all my friends who hunt, use copper, hunting can be great, but use copper, it has so many, it shoots fine and it's so much better for the environment. And I think for a lot of people, they have a whole garage full of lead ammo, like don't use it up. My birds are going to eat it, like our beautiful birds are going to eat it. It's just worth it, save it for a museum piece. So I think switching to lead ammo, and then I think also just supporting all of our programs so that you guys can continue your amazing work. So Pinnacles can keep their staff up and keep their biologists going, so that we have the staffing so we can take, we do not say no to a condor. Any sick condor, our doors are open. We don't care when it is or what else we have going on or anything like that. And it does take resources to submit all that blood work, resources to pay staff, just like for you guys. So I think there's a lot of ways that people can help, get the word out, to switch.
Yeah, and I like that, people that can't get out to the field, they have the opportunity to see the birds there at the zoo on display now.
Yeah.
At that awesome exhibit. And
they're ambassadors, that's for sure.
Yeah. And it's just been such a great partnership. And you guys have brought so much to the table and just reducing the suffering in these birds. And, you've saved countless birds. And, we can't thank you enough either. So it is definitely a team effort. And and like you said, just switch to copper. It cleans the slate on all this, and it's our number one. It's our number one setback with condors. It's really that simple. If folks only knew. So I think we're moving in that right direction. And everything we're all doing is just going to push the needle forward. But I'm sure our viewers right now have probably a lot of questions. Mike is going to help us field some questions. I'm sure they have a lot of great questions for you. And if anybody has questions about the population, go for it, Mike.
Sure. A lot of questions. And really at this time right now in the chat, a lot of thanks being expressed to Dr. Herman for all of the hard work of the Oakland Zoo. Mia writes, the Oakland Zoo is amazing. Elaine is proud to be a docent, and many, many more comments that I don't have a chance to read right now. But Nancy would like to know, how long does the chelation process typically take? How much variation is there? And how do condors react to this? Maybe can you talk about maybe is it painful for the condors, this process?
So that's a really good question. I think they would rather be flying free, but we know they won't live if we don't do this. So would I prefer to have a bunch of wild condors that don't ever have to come to the zoo hospital and get treated? Of course. But I think, everything we do, whether it's the biologists or the veterinary team, all of us on the Condor Recovery Program, it's all risk versus benefit. So again, we handle them in a careful protocol to minimize the stress to them from our handling. They usually don't like being caught, but when they're in hand, most of them are very quiet. They really have different personalities. We'll see someone come back through and we'll be like, I remember you. You were a rascal. We're going to try you in a different stall this time. Or, they're so different and they're so intelligent. These animals are demigods. I'll just put it on the table. They're magnificent creatures and so intelligent. And being close to them, you realize the intensity of what they are. And I think for us to keep them on the planet, it's just the right thing to do. Thank you for appreciating our work, but how could we do anything else? they're magical, beautiful creatures, and they're really important and they're really potent. So I won't anthropomorphize. They don't like what we're doing, but they definitely tolerate it. I think for the program that we had to do to save them, their ability to breed in captivity and toggle back, and some animals, once they're captive, they can never be rewilded. And these guys toggle back and forth between captive management and rewilding in a phenomenal way that no one knew would happen in the 80s when this program started. So, they don't love it, but they definitely put up with it. And what we do is we treat for a week and we see where their lead is. And if they have fragments, we x-ray them after a week of treatment. And when their lead comes down below 35 parts per million, the program as a group, we've all really agreed that they are releasable at that point. But I know I just did routine annual checkups on our condors here at the zoo, and their lead levels are non-detectable. And those were the first condors I've ever seen with non-detectable lead. So say we get a lead above 35, if it's 36, 38, we have to balance, letting them free, sending them back to their family, not being in captivity. So we'll usually have a discussion with Joe or Alicia and the team at Pinnacles and just say, risk, benefit, one more round of handling versus releasing them. We really have to take all the data that we have to decide what's the best path for the well-being of this animal. But say we get a super high, we had a guy in recently from, I think he was from Pinnacles, and he started out at 450 parts per million of lead, moderately sick, and then went down to 250, then went down to 150. And then he came in at about 38. And that's when we tried to release him, and did successfully. So, basically we chelate them until they're a number down until they're releasable. And sometimes that's 1 week, sometimes it's 4 rounds of treatment.